The Denver Broncos prepare for the second day of joint training camp practices with the Los Angeles Rams. What do you need to know about day one and the competitiveness that we saw at the Centura Health Training Center? We're going to dive deep into that on today's episode of Good Morning Broncos. Pour yourself a cup. Try to keep up. Good morning, Broncos country. Welcome into another installment of GMB here on Mile High Sports on the YouTube page, where you can get all your Broncos news, all your Nuggets news, all your Avs, and all your Rockies news as well here on Mile High Sports. Every team, every day. Today's GMB is brought to you by our good friends over there at Superbook Sports. I'm Cody Roark, Broncos reporter from Mile High Sports. And hey, Broncos country, look, we're getting to the most important part of the offseason before the regular season, the third and final preseason game. Roster cuts on the loom, but it's been an exciting week here in Dove Valley as the Los Angeles Rams came to town for Wednesday's joint practice. They'll have another one here this morning at the Centura Health Training Center against the Rams for day two of joint practice. Plus, we get a little bit of a media barbecue afterwards, so very thankful. Thank you so much to the Broncos for providing us with meals and obviously allowing us to be able to cover the teams that Broncos fans obviously want to hear a little bit more stuff going on about. So we'll recap a little bit of day one of Broncos joint practices with the LA Rams. We'll preview a little bit of stuff here in day two. We'll talk about players who stood out and much more. So let's obviously go into a little bit of a recap here. Day one, Dove Valley. You saw the Rams in for their first day, and I like how the Broncos structured it. I mean, obviously Sean Payton, Sean McVay really on the same page with how they wanted to do things, and really the structure of practice is what we've seen so far under Sean Payton here in Denver. You're going to open up. You're going to have your specialist period where guys are coming out. You know, returners are going to return some punts off of the jugs machine that's shooting them up in the air. Guys are going to go through a little bit of a warm-up positional stretch, and then you get into your team-wide stretch and dynamic warm-up period. The Broncos were on one field. The Rams were on the other at the Centura Health Training Center. And then after that, you break it all off, and you go into some individual period. And that's what we saw the Broncos do. We saw the Rams do that. And I think overall, it's crazy to see 90 players on one roster on one field, 90 players on another team's roster on the other field. I mean, there were a lot of football stuff going on. Some former Broncos there in attendance on the LA Rams, former Broncos running back Royce Freeman, a guy who I absolutely loved. When he was here in Denver, wish he would have gotten a little bit more of an opportunity for him. University of Oregon, I watched him as a Duck, one of my all-time favorite Ducks. It was good to see him still doing some things here in the National Football League. Got to see former Broncos quarterback Brett Rippon. Good to see him there. The Rams, just I'd say general observations is last year was a rough year for them overall. But they dealt with injuries to Cooper Kupp. Aaron Donald was banged up a little bit. Matthew Stafford obviously banged up. So for me, I was looking at this Rams team coming into yesterday's practice, and man, when Matthew Stafford's healthy, when Cooper Kupp is healthy, when Cam Akers at running back is healthy, didn't know Aaron Donald as he and his wife are expecting the birth of their child here at any day now. That's going to be a good football team. And look, I think that they have a pretty good system in place. Sean McVay has like this renewed sense to him after really contemplating some retirement. It's good to see him out there, but you can just tell this is a well-coached football team. And the way that the offense for LA is designed, I mean, it's tough for any defense because, right, who's their biggest threat? It's Cooper Kupp at the receiver position. And ideally, what do you want to do? You want to match up Patrick Surtain on him. But the way that they try to scheme guys like Cooper Kupp open or where they place him, it makes it hard for you to get a real, true, legitimate one-on-one opportunity. So we didn't get to see too much of Surtain exactly on Cooper Kupp here, because the Rams offense, they were coming out and they'd go 3-by-1 formation. So, and if you don't know what 3-by-1 is, it's three receivers to one side, one receiver to the other. That's kind of some terminology. If I go 2-by-2, it means that there's two receiving options on one side, two on the other side. Those are just some concepts. Like if you want to know a little bit more about football and you don't know those, just let me know. Like if I'm ever explaining anything on this show and you're like, what the hell is Cody talking about? Let me know. I'd love to break it down for you. Love to help out in any way that I can. But you'd see a lot of 3-by-1 stuff. And obviously everything's out of the shotgun here for the LA Rams. And what they were doing is they just do a great job with their route concepts of attacking different spots of zone coverages, because it's forcing linebackers, it's forcing safeties to have to choose who the most dangerous threat is in their vicinity. And that's where you see guys open things up. But yeah, like I said, they'll put Cooper Kupp, they'll bring him in motion. They'll line up in a trips 3-by-1 formation. They'll put him as the number 3 receiver. And so if you're ever attending a practice or if you're watching games or if you see any film breakdowns, you'll always see, let's say that there's 3 receivers to the left side. The guy furthest to the outside, he's always called the number 1 receiver. The second guy closest to the sideline, he's going to be the number 2 receiver. The third guy on that situation, closer more than likely to the offensive line, that's going to be the number 3 receiver. They were putting Cooper Kupp in this position, and they were having them attack field. Now, when they would stretch the Broncos in terms of their coverage units out, that's where they'd leak the tailback out as kind of like an outlet option. So with Matthew Stafford's first, second, third read in there, he's just dumping it off to the tailback. It's forcing guys to run up, rally, and tackle there. But the Rams offense, obviously, they're very good. Not sure that we're going to see the starters play on the Broncos defense or the Rams offense in Saturday's preseason finale, but there were some moments where the Rams were able to move the ball downfield, and I think Cam Akers did a tremendous job opening up, hitting some holes downhill for the Broncos. Now, keep in mind, Justin Simmons was limited participant, which means he participated in individual drills, didn't do any 7-on-7, didn't do any team. There was a lot of Caden Stearns, Kareem Jackson, no DJ Jones. He was dressed in a shirt today and not a jersey, so he didn't get some action. So you saw Tyler Lancaster getting some reps where DJ Jones normally would, alongside Jonathan Harris and Zach Allen. And then you have Jonathan Cooper, Randy Gregory, Josie Jewell, Alex Singleton, and then Patrick Surtain, Damari Mathis, and Sang Bassi at the nickel spot here for the Broncos. But the Rams offense is designed to be quick hitting. It's going to, we're going to get some chunk yardage, 6 yards, 3 yards, 4 yards, and then a couple of shot plays, strong run game there. Cam Akers looks very healthy. He looks good. Stafford looks healthy. He looks good. So the Broncos were challenged a little bit in the day 1 of joint training camp practices from the Rams offense, but they held their own. They made some plays, had some PBUs, had some moments where Randy Gregory manhandled the right tackle and was in the face of Matthew Stafford. Some good pressure created, some deflections created. Sang Bassi did a great job on a blitz of knocking down really a pass by Matthew Stafford intended for Royce Freeman. So it's just competitive, right? And it's like we can only get so much out of these joint practices in terms of evaluation because we're all seeing it live as it's happening. We get to write down our notes in our handy-dandy little notebook, which I have tons of notes stored here from Broncos practice and specifically the LA Rams one right there. Yeah, front, back, front, back, front, back. But I would say the main thing is I wish we had a chance to go through and watch practice film. Unfortunately, we'll never have access to stuff like that unless we were able to, be on the coaching staff. But initially, I think there were some fans in attendance, and I think it's season ticket holders or VIPs were in attendance. They were able to see that. You see certain things happen, and it's just instant reaction, right? But we don't get the context. Okay, what happened? Was there a coverage breakdown? What did they do on this play? Did they send a guy, not have a guy replacing coverage? I mean, there were some things where, the Broncos can clean some things up, but I thought that the defense and the Rams offense, they challenged each other really well, right? So I think that's a good thing to kind of touch on. Now we're going to get to the offensive side of the ball as well. Thought Russell Wilson, the Broncos offense against the Rams defense, had some moments where they did a pretty good job for the most part. They traded barbs there. There were some times where the Rams defense got the best of the Broncos offense in some of the move the ball periods, some 7-on-7, some pass breakups, some incompletions. But we also saw a lot of big plays here for the Broncos. And let me go back to my notebook here because I wrote down some of the more notable ones here. And I think one thing that Sean Payton said post-practice for the offense, because he was on the offensive field because he's calling the plays, there were too many penalties on Denver. False start, pre-snap. So a couple of false starts that backed them up there. They got to be better on that. That's something that he harped on. But overall, the offense, they saw more overall reps in Wednesday's practice than they would have gotten in a regular season game, in a normal game, right? Usually you think your offense will get around maybe 50, 60 plays potentially. Now, they probably saw in excess, maybe 80 total plays on the field between all the periods combined there. So a lot of work on a hot day in Dove Valley, very humid there. So some good things that you got out of that. But we saw some plays from guys like Cortland Sutton catching some passes downfield. Adam Troutman, I thought, had a big day in terms of the receiving department, a little bit of an outlet there for Russell Wilson. We saw undrafted rookie free agent tight end Nate Adkins. He got involved in the mix as well with pressure coming up the middle for Russell Wilson. Russ did a great job standing in the pocket, firing a shot to Nate Adkins, and he was able to move the ball downfield and move the chains. And then after the offensive period, Denver, they transition to special teams. And I've got to say, Riley Dixon, the Broncos punter, continues to have a strong offseason. If you're a fan of being able to flip field position and have an advantage in that department, where I've always kind of talked about it, and I've shared the thoughts with my co-host, Sarah Bettinger, on the Locked On Broncos podcast, where we've talked about why is it that opposing team punters come into Empower Field a Mile High and out-punt Broncos punters over the last 6-7 years. That's been so wild to see. Riley Dixon, in my opinion, I think if he continues to do what he did, he's done it in practice. He carried over into the preseason game last week. For me, I look at where things are at. Like, he was booming it from 55 yards, 60 yards. I think his best on the day that I accounted for was like a 65-yard punt, good hang time, discipline stuff right there. So for me, the thing I look at here is Denver might have an advantage now where they can actually, here at altitude, flip field position. Because there's times where, hey, look, if Denver suffers a pre-snap penalty on offense, or you give up a sack on third down, it backs you up, can you account for maybe that extra 10 to 15 yards you may lose? Riley Dixon has an advantage that Denver simply hasn't had there in quite some time. So I'm liking what I'm seeing there from the Broncos. So get back to some of the team offense stuff. They did it from the 25-yard line in the red zone period. We saw Javonte Williams get some rushes there, get involved in the passing game alongside Samaje Perine, but Russ also scrambled at times because sometimes coverage was really good. In the red zone, one thing you normally see is when you're trying to protect from 10, 15 yards out, your coverage is going to be tight. You're going to have safeties sitting, with their heels really on the back line of that goal line right there to protect it. And Russ did a good job improvising. I thought Mike McGlinchey, there were times he would have a series on, series off because he's still coming back from the knee sprain. You'd see a little bit of undrafted rookie free agent Alex Polcheski getting some reps there. But gosh, there was one rep where Mike McGlinchey on a run play, it was a run play on the inside, just absolutely takes the defensive end that he was blocking, pile drives him, just drives him into the ground, manhandles him. God, you love to see that. That tells me that, hey, this is an emphasis here from Sean Payton. You want to be physical. That's why they went and they gave Mike McGlinchey a 5-year contract, because he can bring that value in the run game here for the Broncos. Aside from that, we'll get into some players here in a little bit that stood out in practice there. But overall, I think that the offense against the Rams defense, they didn't have the cleanest periods, I would say, during Wednesday's practice, but they held their own. I think both sides traded barbs a little bit. It was a highly competitive period. So for me, I think that's good evaluation to be able to get. I'm curious to hear from Sean Payton today following practice on what he thought initially on the tape of going through and seeing joint practices, what he wants to see cleaned up, what he thought they did really well. We'll get some of that insight. And if we get to ask that, we'll share the insight here on Good Morning Broncos. But we are going to talk about maybe some players who stood out as we close up today's episode of the show. Real quick, I just got to give a special shout out to our friends over there at Superbook Sports. And you hear that, Broncos country? That's the sound of football coming back. And now is the time to place your preseason bets with Superbook Sports. Superbook is the most trusted name in Vegas, and now you can use promo code MILEHIGH to score up to $250 with their first bet bonus, whether you win or lose. They will match your first bet up to $250 with promo code MILEHIGh. Don't miss out this football season. Win some money with Superbook Sports and the promo code MILEHIGh. Visit superbook.com for terms and conditions. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. As we continue on getting to the fourth quarter portion of this morning's edition of Good Morning Broncos, just want to say, hey, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to pour yourself a cup of coffee to talk Denver Broncos football with me here on the Mile High Sports YouTube page. We're here every single weekday, Monday through Friday at 9 o'clock a.m. Mountain Time, which leads us perfectly up into when practice begins here for the Broncos. Getting into some players that stood out during day one of joint training camp practice, I'd say Kendall Hinton is going to be a guy that gets my first nod and nomination there. He came up in the first team offensive period as he continues to work in. And the Broncos, this is the thing they've done with all their receivers. They've rotated everybody in so everybody can get reps. And for Sean Payton, he really wants to see in this final week who separates himself. I thought Kendall Hinton came into the offensive scheme a little bit today, had a big day, a couple of catches that were able to move the chains for a first down when the Broncos had to march 75 yards downfield, and he moved the ball, period. He also hauled in a 27-yard catch down the right side and was able to get away from defenders, a big play for him on the day. I thought he's coming off of it where we were asking questions after the 49ers game about the wide receiver depth. Kendall Hinton didn't necessarily have an impact in the pass catching department, but also run blocking. He got his got his nose dirty a little bit, helped spring up Jaleel McLaughlin for his touchdown. You love to see guys like that who are, not afraid to get their hands, be physical, especially even when they're a little undersized in comparison to maybe some of the guys they're trying to block. Kendall Hinton obviously gets a little bit of a shout out. We talk about Riley Dixon, had a really good day there. Adam Troutman at tight end, I think, had a little bit more of an impact than any of the other tight ends involved in the rotation there and the offense with the first team. The second team offense, Albert Okwuegbunam had a tremendous day yesterday for the Broncos. And what we saw from him is 2 total touchdown catches on the day, one of the ones in the red zone period. Jarrett Stidham found him for a 25-yard completion. It was great to see. And then he had him for a couple of other catches as well because he's a big threat. He understands how to sit against zone. He knows how to beat man coverage. He can body out guys that are a little bit smaller than him, and he was able to do that. He also hauled in a 30-plus yard catch in the move the ball period toward the end of practice there from Stidham. So things like that you love to see. Some other guys there, I mean, like I said, false starts were a little bit of an issue there. We talk about Javonte Williams getting some run. It's good to be able to maybe, get some contact against an opponent you don't normally get to see in your day-to-day, a new scheme. And I say that's one thing that, talking to Broncos players out to practice, Patrick Surtain met at the podium, and he said, hey, you get a different competitive look outside of the same guys you've been going against dating back to the spring there. So the day 2 of practices will continue here with the LA Rams there, and hoping to catch up with Brett Rippon and see maybe how things go in that regard there. But overall for the Broncos, I think here in day 2 and for the Rams, you want to see these guys continue to stay healthy. You want to continue to see clean, competitive practices. I'd say for the most part, there's like one small skirmish early on in practice, really got absolved really quickly. Wasn't a big deal. These guys, I think, are very competitive. They understand that. And overall, I think it was a good showing here for the Broncos on offense, on defense. They were tested, I'd say, at spots with the Rams offense, the Rams defense. You want to see those things happen. I like how they responded. I'm very curious to hear Sean Payton's thoughts after watching the film. But day 2, Broncos joint practices with the LA Rams. They continue here this morning. Broncos Country will have you covered and recapped on tomorrow's episode of GMB. I might be sitting into the studio with this one. We're going to have Sean Drotar on. Hopefully, he and I can discuss what we saw on day 2 of Broncos practice with the Rams. I'm Cody Roark. We'll see you then.